Go Owls.
A new owl has joined the nest, and he's joining us live.
Athletic Director Arthur Johnson is coming up. Plus,
I'm Emily Cochran reporting from Lincoln Financial Field. Coming up, we'll preview Houston and discuss the controversy surrounding a stadium on campus. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now.
hello everyone, and welcome into a brand new edition of Inside the Nest. He's Jackson Neal, and I'm Ray Dunn. Coming up, we'll welcome in Athletic Director Arthur Johnson and preview Saturday's game with Houston.
Heading into this past Saturday, though, the Owls were on a 3-game losing streak and trying to prevent East Carolina from winning back-to-back games in the series for the first time since the 1990s. This was Temple's third road game in the past 4 weeks, and it looks like the Owls might have arrived a little late. East Carolina QB Holton Ahlers links up with Ryan Jones for a 33-yard touchdown. Temple has now been outscored by 67 points in first quarters, but the Owls show a little fight. Ahlers drops back, and his throw across the middle is picked off by Jalen Ware. This is one of the 2 times that the Owls intercepted Ahlers. This set up Temple deep in the Pirate zone, but they are not able to take advantage. After this Dwan Mathis incompletion, Rory Bell missed a 43-yard field goal, and the Owls were not able to get any points off the turnover. The Pirates come right back down the field, and the lefty rolls to his left and finds Jones again. ECU up 14-0 in the first half. Temple tries to respond, but still can't get anything going. Mathis gets dropped for a sack, and an all-too-familiar scene for the Owls. Mathis injures his ankle and was sidelined for the rest of the game. The very next drive, ECU down in the red zone, and Ahlers gets his 3rd touchdown pass of the game, this time to Shane Calhoun. The Pirates up 21-0, and they didn't slow down after halftime. After a shallow kick by Temple, Tyler Snead takes the second half kickoff and finds a lane to the outside and gets all the way to East Carolina's 43-yard line before he's pushed out of bounds. This set up the biggest play of the day. Keaton Mitchell takes the handoff and gets some blockers out in front, and no one can catch up to him. It's a photo finish as Mitchell sprints across the line for the 57-yard score. We'll be hearing his name later in the show. And ECU doesn't let up. Jones gets another catch. The junior tight end had 6 receptions for over 100 yards and 2 TDs. The Pirates back in the red zone, and Mitchell scampers in for the score. That's his 7th touchdown on the year, and Temple does put some points on the board. Rory Bell nails the field goal, preventing Temple from getting shut out for the first time since 2007. Final score, East Carolina 45, Temple 3.
I was cool with it. I was still practicing all week, and even though when I wasn't practicing, I was there just going through the motions, just making sure I ain't lose a step. Just execution, just doing what your job is, doing what you're supposed to be doing, A lot of people get complacent, when they keep running the same plays or it's the same 1st and down or 2nd and down, 3rd and down. They anticipate certain plays and they think they could do other people's jobs. And that just happened for them to get in a 1st down or a touchdown, no communication.
Another game, another large rushing total for Temple's opponent. ECU ran for 246 yards in this game, 146 of them on the back of Keaton Mitchell, who also accounted for 2 touchdowns. The Owls have now allowed a whopping 1,145 yards on the ground in their last 4 games. The defense did produce 2 takeaways, but the offense was incredibly inefficient. The Owls allowed only 2.7 yards per play and mustered up 1.7 yards per pass. No matter how you slice it up, an ugly-looking day, resulting in another blowout loss.
That big rushing day earned East Carolina's Keaton Mitchell Player of the Game honors. His 146 rushing yards was the 2nd highest yardage total this season for him. It was also his 4th game rushing for over 125 yards. That production has him at nearly 1,000 on the year as he's averaging 7.5 yards per carry. Mitchell has already more than doubled his production from last season, and he still has 3 regular season games to go.
As the Owls turn the page and prepare to play at home against Houston this Saturday, there's the everlasting question about their future home.
For more, we go to Inside the Nest reporter Emily Cochran, who is taking another look at the stadium's pushback.
Yeah, thanks, guys. As we know, there has been a long-running dispute on whether or not Temple should build a stadium on campus and give up their home away from home here at the Link. With the new athletic director and president in town, the Stadium Stompers are starting to raise their voices once again, as they wonder what the future of their community might look like with such a stadium on North Broad. There have been many changes at Temple as of late. A new Temple home side, a new president,
forward to taking Temple to the next level,
and most recently, a new athletic director. With new additions come new plans, proposals, and projects. But it's an old one considered long before Johnson came on board that will likely get the most attention. A $130 million one.
A stadium in a residential neighborhood? No.
A movement of North Philadelphia community members, known as the Stadium Stompers, has been pushing back against the proposed 35,000-seat stadium since 2015.
They never thought North Philly would stand up and fight back. This neighborhood taught me how to stand up for myself.
Johnson hasn't talked much about an on-campus stadium or the proposed location near Broad and Norris. The Stompers have been eager to have a conversation. They want to talk.
I think it's certainly on his radar. I don't think we as Stompers are nervous. Things need to work out for the benefit of the people in this neighborhood.
I read between the lines. I read between what he says. I'm listening to what he's not saying.
Upholding the history of this community and the well-being of the people who call it home are concerns. For decades, North Philadelphians have leaned on each other to get through tough times.
We depend on one another because our neighbors are our families.
Many of these Stompers are concerned a stadium would drive their close friends and family out of the homes they have lived in for years. Not to mention adding on to unwanted noise, traffic, and trash.
Clean up my neighborhood. Give back to my neighborhood. You want something from us, but you don't want to talk to us.
This building right behind me houses disabled community members. Adding a stadium right across the street would likely disturb these people. However, the Stadium Stompers are not opposed to building something that benefits both the community and the students.
Why not Temple make a real contribution to the city of Philadelphia and have a huge, huge museum here?
They believe that the land they grew up around deserves to be untouched. They want the history of that street to remain present in their community for many more years to come. Temple still has a contract put in place to play at the Link until 2025, and that's exactly where the Stadium Stompers would like them to stay. Reporting from Lincoln Financial Field, for Inside the Nest, I'm Emily Cochran.
Thank you, Emily. We now have to take our first break of the day. Coming up, we're going to hear from head coach Rod Carey before welcoming in a special guest in the form of Temple's new athletic director.
Plus, we'll get you ready for Temple's game against Houston on Saturday. A nationally ranked team is coming to town. Inside the Nest will be back in 90 seconds.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. After another blowout loss over the weekend, head coach Rod Carey addressed the media on Monday.
His topics: an injury update on his starting quarterback, plus he talks about the mistakes and the issues the Owls are having converting on third down.
Obviously some self-inflicted things in there with execution penalties and things like that we got to work on Sunday cleaning up and going back after, and then turning our attention to Houston. Obviously probably the most talented football team in the league from film study. I know some people call Cincinnati that too. And, I think you're just splitting hairs there between those two teams. So, certainly the most dynamic offense we've faced so far. So good challenge for us this week. And I know we'll be excited to be back home and playing and, get this thing going again and get some good energy going with our guys and good execution going. So with that, we can open it up for questions.
So do you have an idea yet about DeJuan's status for this Saturday?
For this Saturday, no. I know if we had practice today, which today's our off day, he would not be able to practice. And again, we'll go day by day. We'll plan for, him being available, and Justin has to prepare to get ready as well. And then we'll know a lot more tomorrow about, if he can get out there and practice or not.
Have you been able to sort of recognize or distinguish any sort of like an underlying intangible that you can address that's leading to these, physical and mental errors in the game?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question, and question that we've been asking. And as you go through it, and I'm not gonna, I don't make excuses, Sean. I don't do any of that. We have to coach them better. There's certainly, a lot of youth, even with our older guys being back last week, there's still youth and experience there that can lead to some of that. But we have to coach them better, and we have to get them moving in the right direction, because some are similar physical errors and some are not. And so the burden goes to everybody on that, and starts with me.
Hey, Ron, I noticed, you guys are in quite a, the amount of third and long situations that you don't necessarily want to be in. Have you noticed anything, play calling that you and Mike can do to really make third down easier on the offense?
Yeah, we're trying to throw the kitchen sink at it, and we will continue to do that as far as being successful on first and second down to stay out of those third downs. And that's the first answer. The second answer is you got to do some different things on third down when we are in those third and long things. And certainly tried some of those last week, and need to continue to try doing those to wiggle us loose here a little bit and convert on third down.
Carey mentions Temple's troubles on third down there.
Yeah, before we get to that, if I had $1 for every time one of these press conferences started with self-inflicted wounds that they're going to clean up, I would have about $10, but it's because we've only had 10 weeks of this season. It's ridiculous we keep having this conversation again. To third down specifically, I think Javon Evans, who asked the question there, poses a great point about them getting in third and long in a lot of situations, which hasn't been favorable for them. But on third down, they've just been horrid. They've converted about 30% of their third downs this season. That's amongst the worst in the nation, bottom 10. They were 3 of 16 over the weekend on third down. And this is a problem that's been pretty standard throughout the Rod Carey era. They had been subpar the first 2 seasons, about 37% on third down, which is still below average, but it's especially bad this season, and it's shown with their drives, unable to sustain drives early in games and falling in holes quickly.
No, you're certainly right with that. And then one thing I always hear with him is how they need to coach them better. They need to make different adjustments. Well, right now it's the same problems we hear every single week and we see on the field every single week. Lack of tackling, inability to move the ball on third downs, slow starts. These happen time and time again, and all I'm saying is I'm not seeing the right adjustments being made, whether that's changing the play calling, changing the practice schedule, changing how you begin the game and game plan from the start with your pregame warmups. These adjustments are clearly not being made because the same problems happen every week.
And it doesn't matter who's at quarterback. You mentioned Dwan Mathis. Don't want to leave that out of what we saw in that pressure. Dwan Mathis wouldn't have practiced yesterday. If they did, it'll be interesting to see his availability as they move forward going towards Saturday's game. For us, now it's time for the second part of Carey's presser, where he talks more about Houston's offense, Justin Lynch's progression, and those deserving of a single digit.
What you talked a little bit about Houston at the top, but what specifically about that offense makes them as explosive as they are?
Well, yeah, I think you talk about 2 things with Houston. They're very disruptive on defense, extremely disruptive, and that's a mark of a really good defense. And offensively, the quarterback is playing at a high level, and they have really good skill around them, and surrounded by an offensive line that is staying on blocks and allowing that skill to have space, whether that's in the pass game protecting or in the run game, creating some holes.
What have you seen from Justin's progression so far? Obviously, probably not the way you wanted to get him into the game with injuries to Dewan, but he's a young player. He's played a lot of football this year. How have you seen his growth from, early in the season to now?
Well, that was really his most extensive time since Boston College, right? And, I thought there was definitely some nerves on his part early on. And I think that led to some inconsistencies with his decision making. But we, this week, if Dewan can't go, he'll get the lion's share of the reps. And that will hopefully, it'll eliminate some of those inconsistencies when you're getting the number 1 reps as opposed to the number 2 in practice. There'll definitely be a bigger comfort zone there with the game plan.
Last couple of weeks here, is the tape showing, are receivers not getting separation they were getting earlier? Or right, if the quarterback's not seeing that separation right, because there's just everything is short and dumps and, not much happening downfield, it seems like.
Yeah, well, I think that we've certainly had some people open downfield, and at times we've missed them. And then other times they have been covered, and we're thrown into that, and those are tough throws to execute, but have to get better at that for sure.
And would it be fair to draw an inference that nobody else on this team has done enough to earn a single digit yet?
So we have had 1 single digit vote at this point, and no one got voted a single digit. So that hasn't changed to this point. So if you're asking me whether that's fair, if you bring that conclusion, yeah, I mean, that's what's actually happened.
Starting at the top of that presser, Carey does not hold back on his admiration of this Houston team.
No, he really doesn't. And when you look at this Houston team, it all comes down to that high-flying offense. Right now, they're averaging 39 points a game. That's top 10 in the country. And yes, we talked about Clayton Tune in this passing attack, but also look at the running game. The Cougars have 3 different players who have over 100 yards this season, including Alton McCaskill, who has over 600 yards and 12 touchdowns. When you have a high-flying passing game, it's hard to stop. But you mix that with a good running game that opens up play action, that's almost impossible.
And that was something that the Owls struggled with on Saturday, the play action of ECU. Don't discount this Houston defense, though. They are allowing just 4.8 yards per play. That's top 15 in the country. They're great on third down. They are great at keeping drives short. They don't let teams really sustain drives. They're one of the best at keeping teams away from the red zone. And something for a young quarterback just getting his feet wet once again. They are only allowing 2.9 yards per rush, so Justin Lynch won't be able to hand it off and really be able to lean on a running game if the team struggles early.
Oh, especially not. And also they mentioned the single-digit vote right there. I can't think of a player that earned a single-digit. Owls are getting scored 180-27 in their past couple games. That's a minus 153 point differential. Well, it's now time for us to take another break, but don't go anywhere. We have not 1, but 2 special guests still to come.
One is supposed to steer No Huddle in the right direction. The other guest is expected to steer the entire athletic department in the right direction.
Yep, we're still not sure who has the tougher job. Also, we'll break down the matchup with Houston. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. After a tough road loss, the Owls now return home to take on Houston.
It's a matchup that hasn't happened since 2018. It's also a matchup that the Owls have never won on home turf. The Cougars are ranked 17th in the nation coming into this matchup. The keys to Houston's success will be its dominance defensively, especially in big spots. The Cougars have allowed the 8th fewest red zone opportunities in the nation, mostly because of the work they're doing early in drives. The Cougars are 4th in the country in third down defense, allowing opponents to convert just 28.3% of the time. It's a position where Temple has particularly struggled, ranking 7th worst in the country at converting third downs. Against ECU, the Owls went 3 of 16 on third downs, going 1 for 8 in the first half. Without an effective running game, Houston can look to control the pace against Temple by doing what they've done best all year, getting opposing offenses off the field.
Temple is going to face an uphill battle this week, but there is a blueprint to beat this Houston team. Score early and often. Last week, the Cougars trailed an underdog South Florida team at half because the Bulls came out firing. USF scored 3 touchdowns on its first 5 possessions, including returning a kickoff 100 yards for a TD. Earlier this season, in Houston's only loss, Texas Tech put up 38 points. The Cougars will score. They're top 10 in the country, averaging 39 points a game. But they've given up over 35 points 3 times this season, including their past 2 games. Houston is leading the AAC right now, so they could be looking past this game. Temple has to catch Houston off guard and come out strong right from the start.
Another week, another game on ESPN+. It's been over a month since Temple was on cable television as they prepare for their 4th straight week on the streaming service. The game will kick off at noon, which has become the norm for Temple home games. There hasn't been a game in the mid-afternoon or evening at the Link since 2019.
Houston is in the middle of its best year since its conference-winning 2015 season. Last year, the Cougars had a season interrupted by COVID with 6 different games postponed. That inconsistency led to a poor ending to 2020 as Houston dropped 4 of its last 5 games to finish 3-5. 2021 has been a completely different story though. After an opening weekend 38-21 loss to Texas Tech, Houston has ripped off 8 straight wins. The Cougars' high-flying offense is a big reason why. In their 8-game winning streak, Houston is outscoring opponents by 169 points, including 5 wins by double digits.
As for the individuals who have shown through for Houston so far this season, I'll start with the obvious. Quarterback Clayton Tune has become a reliable signal caller in his 3rd season as a starter. The junior has completed 70% of his passes, going for 8.7 yards per pass. He's also already surpassed his touchdown total from a year ago, with 19 on the season.
And most of those TDs have gone to one player, Nathaniel Dell. The sophomore wide receiver leads Houston in all major receiving categories with 56 catches for 839 yards and 8 touchdowns. And he's only getting better. His best 2 games of the year have come in the past 2 weeks with a total of 329 yards and 4 TDs in Houston's most recent wins. Now, it's time to show what our offense can do.
It's No Huddle. Today, we are joined once again by Owl Sports Update anchor, Luke Milai. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Let's do this.
If you could add any player in Temple history to put on this team, who would it be?
Well, there are so many different directions you can go with this one. I'm going all the way back to the early 80s. I'm looking for my guy there, specifically Guy Peters. The defensive tackle from the early 80s is the all-time leader in career sacks at Temple with 32. That's 6 more than the closest guys behind him. He's established himself as one of the best defensive tackles in Temple history. And now, looking at this season's team, a team that ranks in the bottom 15 in the country in sacks, I think Peters on this Temple squad would be a match made in heaven.
I'm going someone a little more recent. I'm saying Tyler Matakevich. The linebacker played from 2012 to 2015, is one of only 7 players to record 100 tackles in each of his 4 seasons in college football. Had a year where he was a consensus All-American, Bronco Nagurski, a trophy winner, and Chuck Bednarik, award winner. But most importantly, he was a single-digit leader. War number 8, he was the heart and soul of that Temple defense that embodied Temple tough. Right now, Temple's allowing over 220 yards on the ground a game. They could use someone like Matakevich leading that defense.
Now, Luke had the right idea going for the defensive line. I'm sticking with that theory, but I'm going even further back into history. I'm going with Joe Klecko. I was looking for a defensive lineman who's going to dominate the line of scrimmage and wreak some havoc. I thought about Guy Peters. I thought about Dan Klecko, Lance Johnstone, and Quincy Roche. But I wanted to go with Joe Klecko. He was part of the New York sack exchange for the New York Jets back in the day. Sacks and tackle for loss were not kept track back when he played, so we have no idea where he would fall in terms of those records. He did graduate with the tackle record for Temple in his final year. He was named to Pro Bowl 3 different positions in the NFL. That's my pick. I think he would bolster a very bad run defense.
So we touched on a little bit in that past question, but right now, what has been the biggest weakness for Temple so far this year?
Yeah, well, if you listen to my spiel about Guy Peters or the defensive line, I don't think it's any surprise I'm going right back to the well. I already mentioned they're bottom 15 in the country in sacks, but how about the rush defense? We've talked about it so much. It was highlighted a ton in the USF loss, where the Owls allowed over 400 yards on the ground to the Bulls. They're allowing over 220 yards on the ground, as you mentioned, Jackson, this season. It's just something that has to be cleaned up. It's the most glaring weakness to me of many weaknesses for this Temple team.
I'm going with the catch-all. You mentioned that there was a lot of weaknesses. I'm going with execution across the board. There's a reason that every week the presser starts with, we need to clean up the self-inflicted wounds of last week, because penalties, turnovers, missed tackles, you go down the line, every position group on this team has something to answer for with their part in the struggles of the team this season. Just looking at last week, we already hammered home Temple on third down. They were 13 of 33 passing the ball. Receivers aren't getting open, quarterbacks aren't seeing them when they're open, and there's been definitely some problems with the offensive line this season. They're averaging less than 5 yards per play on offense, and we've all seen the defensive struggles. There's plenty of blame to go around.
Looks like you read my notes right. I'm going to go with something a little bit more specific, but you touched on it there. I'm going to say third down conversions for this offense. Right now, Temple is averaging less than a touchdown per game in these 4 losses, and the big reason why is third downs. Against ECU, they were just 3 of 16, and this losing streak as a whole, they're converting at just 28%. Third downs are so important to a football team. They allow you to extend drives. They turn punts into field goals into touchdowns. They keep your defense off the field so you can't give up 220 rushing yards a game. Third downs is really where it all comes down to in a football game, and Temple right now needs to improve that.
All right, well, we're building up to Saturday's game. What is your final score prediction for that game?
I think it's going to be a tough one for the Owls. Houston, as we know, is one of the only undefeated teams in the conference alongside Cincinnati. And now let's look inward at Temple for a second. The Owls have had 4 games where they've scored less than 10 points this season. They've also had 4 games where they've allowed 40 plus. That's just not a good recipe for success. And against an undefeated Houston team in conference that Rod Carey has called one of the most talented teams in the conference, we saw what Cincinnati did, the other talented team in the conference, beating the Owls by 49 points. It worries me what's going to happen to Temple this week. I've got Houston 42-6.
Yeah, even Rod Carey said he thinks Houston's better than Cincinnati, and that game was a blowout in of itself, 52-3. I'm going to have to agree with you, Luke. I see this one being a tough matchup for Temple. Right now, we mentioned Houston coming in, scoring a lot of points, but Temple also 9th worst in the country, allowing 37 a game. This defense can't seem to stop anybody right now. Clayton Tune, Nathaniel Dell, we talked about that passing attack. They also have McCaskill out of the backfield. I see this Houston offense coming out strong early, putting up a lot of points, running away with this one, and we don't even know what's going on with the quarterback situation for Temple as of right now. I see the Cougars running away with this 49-7.
It's not a lot of positives here. You both have laid out pretty much the argument in favor of Houston. I'm going to go with 38-10 as my final score. I do offer a positive note for those on the Owls side. 4 of the last 5 times a ranked team has come to Lincoln Financial Field, the Owls have won and pulled off the upset. So there's your positive note for me. I'm the brimming, shining optimism here on this show week in and week out, but I'm still taking them to lose 38-10. That's all the time we have for No Huddle. Thank you so much for coming in, Luke.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's now time for us to take a break, but coming up, Temple's new Director of Athletics, Arthur Johnson, will join us live in studio. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back.
Welcome back. We've teased it for a while, but the big moment is finally here. He's the newest Owl, and it's about time we welcome him inside the Nest.
He's Temple's newest Vice President and Director of Athletics, Arthur Johnson. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and you're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
How are you? So let's start off. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Obviously, we got great weather, but it's also the start of basketball season with women's basketball getting started tonight, and then the men start tomorrow. But this is a huge time in college athletics as we wind down the football season, finish up some other sports, but with college basketball starting, which will lead us up to March Madness.
You mentioned in your introductory presser you were going to take a 90-day listen and learn tour. So far, what do you think is the most important thing you've learned?
I think that the love that the people who support this institution, that they have for Temple and their time on campus, their time since that time. The staff has been great. We've also have some great student athletes who have been very welcoming and open to meeting me and visiting with me. Our coaches and staff have been great. But really overall, in visiting with your donors, those supporters, to talk about how much they truly love Temple and what the experience means to them.
So far this fall season, it's been a tough one for Temple Athletics. Every single team under 500. Right now, when you look forward, is there, at the health of the athletic department, is this a team-by-team process, or is there a policy that can hopefully elevate these teams going forward?
The goal is to elevate all of them, not just to focus on one or two sports. Obviously, some get more attention than others, but we got over 500 student athletes who represent us in 19 different sports, and they all are interested in winning. We're interested in a great experience across the board for all of them, and it starts with each individual team. However, the expectations will be there for all of our teams.
And narrowing in on a program for a second here, obviously this is a football program. We want to talk about that football program. 4-12 over the last 2 seasons. When do you start to evaluate the program, and what changes need to be made to get them back on the right track?
Well, I think evaluation takes place really across of a whole season. As you know, my first official day was 6 days ago, so I'm still new to all of this and trying to follow it. But really, my job right now is to be supportive of Coach Carey and and our student athletes as we continue to compete and get ready to play Houston this weekend, plus the rest of the season. So it's evaluating everything and getting feedback from people who have been here, but also finding out, okay, what are some of the reasons for our struggles or challenges. But the biggest thing I can do right now is be supportive of our coach and our program.
So far, there has been a concern from some and excitement from some others with you now in town about the idea of a proposed stadium. The original idea was on Broad and Norris, but there's other proposed projects going in that place now. Right now, is there an idea if Temple does reconsider the stadium that they look maybe to the north of the campus?
Well, actually, that's something that you would have to ask President Wingard and the leadership of the institution. I haven't had time to really look into that. At this point, I'm busy trying to meet people, learn more about the university, and also find ways to help our student athletes who are currently here.
And mentioning helping these student athletes, there's so many schools across the country that have jumped right in and started to use the advantage of NIL for its student athletes. What is Temple doing, and what are the plans going forward to try and put student athletes in the best position to take advantage of their name, image, and likeness?
Our staff already had a program that was in place, and they were working on it. I think Christy and Justin were the two main people. They've also had conversations with the law school about a potential partnership and helping our student athletes learn. But the key thing with all of this is educating students on how to build their brand and the value of their brand, and then figuring out ways of how it works. But all across the country, we're all still trying to figure out how this is going to change the landscape of college athletics. But I think we have a great opportunity here in this greater Philadelphia community to really take advantage of NIL.
And speaking the changing landscape of college athletics, right now there's been a lot of conference realignment with changes coming to the AAC. Is Temple married to this conference, or is there an idea that maybe another move could be imminent?
No, right now we're in the AAC, and our goal is to be the best team that we can be in the AAC across the board. So in addition, we're in a couple of other conferences as well, the Big East for a couple of sports, I think the Eagle Conference also. So the American is where we are and where we plan to be until something changes. But right now, we want to be the best we can be in the American.
If we could reconvene as a group 5 years from now and have a similar conversation between the three of us and ask you about what you've accomplished at Temple, what would you hope that conversation would include?
I think providing great experiences and memories for our student athletes, and that includes winning championships. So winning championships in sports and continuing the great academic job that Justin and the team here has done with our student athletes across the board when it comes to the academic performance of our students. So graduating students, but also having success in competition in all of our sports and having a number of championships and participating in postseason play.
Looking back at your time, you just came from the University of Texas. What are some lessons that you learned at that large athletic department that you want to bring here to Temple?
I think the biggest lesson is knowing that kids love to compete. We're bringing groups together from various and diverse backgrounds from different countries, from different parts of this country, and they all have a love for their sport, and they want to be the best that they can be, but they also have a hunger for learning. We have some great students who are interested in learning, but at the core of it all and the crux of it all, we both programs have about 500 to 550 student athletes coaches. I think there are 21 programs at Texas. We got 19 programs here. Obviously, the financials are different. However, we still have to manage our finances here just like we had to manage finances at Texas.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure getting a chance to speak with you and meeting with you.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and always go Owls. I hope fans out there that you get out to watch our men's and women's basketball teams compete, starting tonight with the women and tomorrow with the men, and then Saturday's doubleheader, which is unique but a great opportunity to celebrate Temple.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, good luck going forward. And we now have to take our last break of the day, though.
When we come back, it's time to take a look around the conference and at the national landscape. Inside the Nest will be back in 90 seconds. Where all eyes are on the rankings.
And after upsets both in the American and nationally, there's been some shakeup in the standings. We go to Inside the Nest reporter Eric Jessberger to break it all down. Hi, Eric.
Thanks, Jackson and Ray. This was the weekend that ended with a lot of close scores and then some. Minus Temple's loss Saturday to East Carolina by 42. All of the conference games were won by 12 points or less. UCF held off Tulane with just a 4-point win. Memphis upset SMU with a late game interception, solidifying a 28-25 win. And number 6 Cincinnati escaped the Golden Hurricanes, just barely getting out of Tulsa with its national ranking standing intact. Taking a look at where the conference currently stands, there are some changes, and it starts right at the top. Houston, Cincinnati, and now UCF hold 1 through 3 with a combined record of 15-2 in conference play. UCF's win and SMU's loss Saturday begin a domino effect that shakes up the rest of the standings from 3rd place on down. The middle of the pack now sees SMU at 4 after the Mustangs drop their second conference game to Memphis, who jump up to 6th with a new look at bowl eligibility. The Owls, now sitting at 9th, join Navy, USF, and Tulane, making up the bottom feeders of the American, a group with only 4 conference wins in 20 total games. A week ago today saw the first college football playoff rankings released, and to the surprise of many, the AAC was not represented in the top 4. Cincinnati checked in at 6th behind Ohio State at number 5, and then the playoff projected top 4 in Georgia, Alabama, Michigan State, and Oregon. With all teams in action this past weekend and a Purdue win over Michigan State, when the next playoff projection picture is released every Tuesday until December, you can expect Luke Fickell's Bearcats, who remain unbeaten and worthy of top 4 consideration, to be paying close attention to the rankings and their spot right now on the outside looking in. Those are the updated standings after Week 11, with 82% of AAC teams still holding bowl game eligibility. Jackson and Ray, Cincinnati ranks higher in the AP poll standings. However, Houston still holds that top seed in the conference. How do you fare the rest of this conference playing out with Houston and Cincinnati at the top?
I definitely still look at Cincinnati being the strongest team in this conference. They're the higher ranked team.
Yeah, I think they got it right. I think Cincinnati is the better team of the two. I think they're going to be the ones that end up holding the crown at the end of the season.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for coming on and giving us that update. We have a sit-down coming on Thursday with Mia Davis. She is a 3-time first-team All-AAC women's basketball player. And she's sitting down with Sage Hurley to share her expectations for her last year on North Broad and look back at her career as a whole. That's coming up live Thursday at noon on Owl Sports Update. And I can't wait for that sit-down interview this Thursday. As for today, it's all the time we have for Inside the Nest.
For Jackson Neal, I'm Ray Dunn. Thank you all for watching today's show, and we will see you all next week.